Texas. See how that works? Which is what? The Lone Star State. The only Moorish country with a lone star, right, is who? Look, you see how we just did that? It's Morocco, which is Granada, which is Mauritania, which is Arabia. You see what I'm saying? Which is the dwelling place and owned by the Moors and the ancient Mauritanians, who were the Phoenicians and the Canaanites, right? And the ancient Indians, right? And their Indian associates, meaning the ones that came from across, not even the mestizos that we'll get to in a second that came after, not even them. We're talking about the descendants of the Meru, who came by way of the Mauryan Chandragupta dynasty and came up by way of the Olmecs through the Pacific when it was all connected, right? Way before any blacks, noble or otherwise, came from Europa. That's why we could say we was always here. Because once you know that when they say the family of nations or the human families of the planet Earth, this is what they're talking about. The people who created the caste systems, right, who originally, again, were the Moors through Hammurabi, but that was for dealing with people who weren't of the original line or the original blood. This is how you deal with them. They were not considered human until they got wrestle control. That's why all the movies they make of them is being inhuman. Because it's their natural state. Not for all of them. Because remember, we also created races of them to fight against them. That's where the Italians come from. That's where the so-called Chinese today come from. That's where the so-called come from. Genghis and them created the Asians over there. The Moors of Spain and them created the Italians and the so-called Spanish and all that. Actually, it was a direct line. It was the Zambo. It was from the Moors to the Zambos. They was at the top. Then from the Zambos to the Chinos. Then from the Chinos to the Coolies. Then from the Coolies to the Chicanos. And then from the Coolies to the Mestizos. From the Mestizos to the Chicanos. And then from the Chicanos, you get the Los Indios, the ones who came over here, whose mothers was taken as Chinese women captives and sold to the Moors that was running the black clans and all of that at the time. And then they bred with them. And then this is where we get these Native Americans today. It's facts. That's why they all got East Asian DNA. If you from here, you would have more from here DNA than from somewhere else. So how are you from somewhere else claiming that you was here from 1,000 years ago? No, you got here in the 13th century as a slave to Genghis and the Tartary Moors that came with the invasion. And then the Moors from Mandi, who heard about it, came from Meru and all of that to hold us down because they was a part of the family through the Mansa. Remember Mansa Musa? That's when he got on the boat, made his cousin the regent, and came over here. Because he was a part of the Mansa, which was one of the families, right? The Mansa, the Mada, the Maga, and the Mandaga, right? The Mandis. That's why in roots, Kunta Kinte was Mandi, right? That's why in Amistad, Sing K, who was really Sing Bey in real life, when you really do the research, it was Sing Bey, he was also Mandi. It had nothing to do with being over there and over here. It was about who was down with each other during the expansion and then the fall. And then these Freemason dudes came in with their fake history and all of that to kind of put it all together so that way they could all get paid. and keep us in the dark. We just went through the connection. You know what I'm saying? That's why, if anything, you get from it the actual connection of this coming into being, because that's what allowed us as a people to do that. This flag, this crest I'm showing you is going back to the 7th century, describing the Moors coming in. So it ain't got nothing to do with who is doing what or who's not, feeling them because the Moors did this. Like, I'm just showing you, man, we ain't get into nobody else yet. Therefore, the problem didn't start with nobody else. It started with us. These so-called white people are constant mediators in people's situations, but that's the European way. That's what we picked up from living up under them. But remember, our ancestors, the Moorish side of the family, was the one that educated Britain. All of the British royal family. That's why they was the most literate of all of the royal families of the day, except for the Oldenburg. The Oldenburg is the parent house of what they call Romanov. They are the oldest out of all of them. And as you see, that's because they trace their line directly back to Genghis. You see? And they had to wipe them out. That's these dudes, who they call the Abashi. So the white Abashis, who was they slaves, who wound up becoming their equals after the Bolshevik Revolution, wound up growing their hair to look like the original nobility Abashi that had freed them after the Tsar freed them. See, this his hair. This the hat. This is the same hat that you see on the royal guards from Europa, right? Who guard Elizabeth, the English one, right? And the English was the only ones that ain't go to war with Russia. You see, because the British or the British Empire was Moorish. That's what they also keeping, but they were Hebrew Moors. That's why James wrote the Bible and the Demonology at the same time. But again, you can't be borrowing money from these boulets to come up if you're not going to provide them with the real info. You see? But as you see, as Moors, Tamaure, what does it say? It said that we keep the real for the unveiled. See what I'm saying? And so the decoy system was employed by this European nobility basically to break down the structure value and then separate the empire along pseudo fake geographic lines that really don't exist and still don't really. So that is why today we see these as 3 different empires when it's the same empire in 3 different places. But at one time, it was all joined together. And when it was joined together, it was called Armorica, or what they call Sambo Judasia, the lands of the Sambo, who are the gods. This is today. This dude would be from Harlem. This dude today would be from Brooklyn. This dude today would be from what you call it? Manhattan or Queens. Excuse me, from Queens today. So what this also means, based on this New Madrid earthquake, is that if we look at it from the perspective of coming from that time period, that the actual what we call deluge actually happened a lot closer to our timeline than we actually think. So when we talk about the expansion, this is how it came from 1860 to 1910, when the Tsar let all of them out in response to the undervalued payment that came from the United States to dissolve what at the time was New Russia. Okay. And those lands of New Russia, again, were peopled by these Asiatic Moors. While on the other side, on the Iberian Peninsula side, right, which was over here, they are dealing with the other expansion. You know what I'm saying? So the Tsar, big up to brother Abdu on Facebook. You get the Tsar, who they say is again the king of Hawaii, which is the lie, and he frees all of the slaves, the Slavs. So as you see, we get an outflux of Khazars going into the Atlantic, and then you get an influx, also an outflux of what we'll call Asiatics or Eastern European Balkan slaves going into the Pacific. It's interesting they depicted Morocco here as a white rabbit, because this is essentially what they're representing, what they're trying to do. Basically take the adrenochrome from the Moors. See? Pull it in all these different directions. But you see, look how close the Atlantic Ocean is. You see? Look, the Mediterranean is here, and the Atlantic Ocean is separated by what? The Strait, or what they would call the Straits of Gibraltar. So that means that the Atlantic is that close. How close is America? You see? That's why we can say Northwest Africa. They just took West out. And then again, this being the Tsar, they shut him down, kill him and his family, and then work to establish these states, and then exile all of their African, nobility Europe people, and continue to plan on their tip, while blackmailing them, the European blacks, who are now basically posing as Africans. So again, when we were talking about in the joint, when we were reading, let's just say it, about Morocco, you can look at it from this perspective. And this is from, again, the CIA, from their database on one of their reports. So whoever got a thing can take it up with them. So that means if the Moors went to attack them from southwest Morocco, they came from here, which is what? Arabia, right? Or Tuscarora, which is Turkey, and also Arabia, because this is the peninsula in which sits the top Mount Arabia, right? Like I said, this from the CIA, the Morocco map on the right, from one of their WikiLeaks data reports. So you notice they also spell Maroc, Maroc. You know what I mean? Discussing the empire. So these people are the Native Americans. Yes, the Native American. First leader of the Native American Party. The term Native American referred to pale European people with a relatively established history in the United States of America. Notice the term relatively established, which means newly, which means not really established, right? The history of the United States of America as opposed to the recent immigrants who held the nativist point of view. Ironically, it did not refer to the actual first humans, you see, who were the original people, who were of the line of Adam Kadmon, i.e. Hiram, the true Phoenicians, who had been preyed upon by the wicked and decadent Hereshef, posing as all of these different orders over the centuries, trying to get rid of the race of high priests of Anu, finding ways to genetically identify them, to genetically shut it down, to shut off them from their true crown or corona, which is another way of saying halo. So this dude was a Jew. And a lot of white people, after being freed by the Czars and them, came over as slaves and wound up living with in these conditions. And black men like Andrew Jackson or Johnson or whoever just took a big thing and wanted to exterminate them. And this caused incidents between him and the other black nobility people who was actually in control, in power at the time, who was making money off of this. You see? These are the big oil barons and stuff who are receiving compensation and stuff back. And so they start using the white terror system as a means to not only disinherit these people's lands, but actually do that. Because when you think about it, a lot of these banks, when you look at the people on the board and you go back to the old times, a lot of them people, when you start seeing, they all black. So at some point, these butlers became what they are. They tell us that this was Joe Ben Solomon, and this was some other dude in the book, they said. It wasn't until Runoko Rashidi came out to prove that this was James Madison, and that this was the Sultan that was under his jurisdiction at the time. But like I said, the Quran and them say that his name is Joe Ben Solomon, but that was just probably his Hebrew name. You see what I'm saying? His Moorish name was Sultan Abdullah El, basically. But just look up the name of the Sultan at that time, of the time of peace, Treaty of Peace and Friendship, which was signed on the Delaware River, right? That's all up in here. Right in Erie, where they said, when you read the Clock of Destiny, it says that the last naval battle was fought with the Moors there, right? On the Battle of Lake Erie. And it was signed on the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, was signed on the Delaware River, 1786. It makes more sense than them saying that the Sultan reached Morocco across the water in 3 days. And it was some Arab dude that did it. Does that make sense? The forgotten cause of the Civil War proves it. It was white people being sold in mass that had to get shut down because these dudes was cornering the market and using these white people as terror objects against one each other to collect land and then rent the land to these white folk and give them the right to set up fake municipalities and then pay them on the low. Meanwhile, posing or getting along with it and creating different, you see what I'm saying, different fake organizations to get niggas to waste their time with. Also, they could stay in power. This was on your left, the Prince of Poland. And on your right, the dude they call Hannibal, the Moor of St. Petersburg, he's actually the Tsar. They created them stories. And you know it because they said that Hannibal was actually Ethiopian. And Ethiopia and Russia was at war, and that allegedly he was a prisoner of war, and that Peter took liking to him and then brought him into court, which may or may not be true. But if it's coming from them, you always got a question. So you have a Russian Tsar on the left. You have a indigenous Russian, and then you have a Polish prince. So they can come out and say, oh, he's bugging, it's not this and that. Again, you bringing me stories from what these liars from the Gamay and the Louvre and all of these fake places is telling me is this history. And it's all based on this being sold from Africa myth. You see what I'm saying? And you can't explain why all of these pictures that's supposed to be so old, the statues that's supposed to be so old, are so newly finished. You know what I'm saying? Like, you bugging. On your left is a self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci of himself, and then on your right is Leonardo da Vinci self-portrait, and then on your left is the nobles from the Jerusalem, or what they call Peru. You'll notice the white Moroccan burnous they all wearing, along with the white and the red fez, representing the red and the white crown. And then here, as you see, Leonardo da Vinci is obviously a Moor who actually drew himself like that. So what? So he was accurate with flying and all that, but he didn't know that he was black. Exactly. What's the turban about? Well, remember, this took place in Old Spain, right? And remember what Old Spain was, what is. That's basically Texas now. You know what I'm saying? When we look at it now, but again, a lot of that old stuff was nuked out and all of that. That's why so much land barren in Texas. They made sure they destroyed and atomized as much as they could. But they can't get rid of all of it because, like I said, internally, we are constantly regenerating and manifesting this energy that's waiting to manifest. We are withholding it because we are looking at it from the perspective of trying to survive. And we should be thinking about ways that we're going to live. Surviving means that we're at their whim, but living means that we have our own jurisdiction in which the melanin and the melanocytes, right, mix and combine in a manner that allows us the free expression that we see in all of these movies. But that can't manifest if we're constantly being bombarded with outside influences, because each of those influences basically represents a virus that keeps us from reinstituting or uploading ourselves into the reality, but we're all still living like this. That's what these things are. You could drive down the street past the stop sign and you stop, and then you keep going and never think about that stop sign again. But that stop sign has done the same for everybody else that's passed before it. You dig what I'm saying? So that means that the stop sign is always there. It's whether or not you are in the position to use it or observe it to use it. You understand what I'm saying? These niggas been on it since this guy. This guy right here is Flavius Josephus. He's the Lord, the master of all of the lies that were translated by others that he levered from. He started as a Roman who killed mad so-called Jews, so-called black people, and then eventually got struck and decided to become a Jew himself and became like the head Jew for these Khazarians in their little community. But these Khazarians was under the greater Hittite Empire, i.e. Turks and stuff, so they would only have limited jurisdiction around them. But eventually he able to get to Rome, and so he became one of the chroniclers for the Romans. You know what I'm saying? And so from the Romans, they did that. And so this is all mocking us, because this is how we all dress. All of the ancient books and temples and all that stuff y'all read, everybody's dressed like this. The people that's not dressed like this was usually the slaves, right? Look at what they doing to the black man. This is them after they took control of the temple. This was the last vestment. You see? Mocking him, because now they done took over. Yes, because that's what they doing. Look at him. He's not happy. He's the last vestment. It's the last Moor of the temple that they done now took over and turned into some orgy place for them to get their stuff off. You did? And this was happening all over the country, all over the world. Them attacking Moors, breaking Moors down to the point where the black Freemason societies was the only place that they felt they could be that. But again, you can't, because all of them people was already dead when they joined. You see what I'm saying? So any place where there was mosques or anything like that, real temples, they shut all of that down. And then the only way you could know about it or real, you know what I'm saying, would be through them. Because that's what was predicted would happen. Because we fell into or descended into the physical space that allowed them to exist. You know what I'm saying? Due to our lower nature in using them as engines of war against us. So eventually, the homeless ones, you see what I'm saying, wind up taking control of the house. Okay? Because ain't no people that lived in stuff like this, built no pyramids, built no nothing. You dig what I'm saying? But through these lies and through the recreation of history and the participation of those in our societies that allowed them to do that, see, like I said, Dr. York even told us with the real Islam and the fake Islam. So just because they put on a turban and a fez and act like they this that don't mean that the actual thing that they wearing is theirs or that the fez or the turban is evil. That means if you look at it like that, that means there's something in you that believes the worst about your own people. Because ain't no white people in history ever wore no fez and turban as an actual life choice culture thing after 1900s that wasn't owned by somebody that wore that. Or wasn't in a position to be under it. You dig? With the introduction of the false Muhammad, right? Musalamat ibn Habib Hanifi by Saint Augustine, the real Muhammad was misplaced. The real Quran was misplaced, and the Jews and their conspiracy got together with the Jesuit priests and the Catholics. You don't tell me you don't know the Catholic Pope is a Jew. He wears a yarmulke and he prostrates, blah, blah, blah. Musalamat came from the direction of the Radaya in Arabia, right? With his God named Rahman. The new Quran was the main piece in the Vatican's game to bring the Arabs under the Roman rule. See? This is from his book, Mohammedanism. Originally, it was in the book he did called 100 and something questions to ask a Muslim, I believe. So most Muslims have never read the original Quran, right? Which was in the possession of Fatima, the daughter of the real Muhammad. So this new Quran, which was the possession of Fatima, whatever, this new Quran was put together in Rome, right? And that's the Quran that they put the what you call it under. The Muslims that come in under their system, they make them swear under the Roman Quran. The sister, if you look up the sister who became the first black Muslim judge or something, look her up and look up her inauguration and look at the Quran that she's holding, and you'll see it says the Roman translation of the Quran. So you already know what that is. You know what I'm saying? You can't serve two masters like that. Not like that. And so in Rome, to give the Catholic priest named Waraka ibn Nafal, see, who worked with both the real Muhammad, convincing him that he was the final prophet, and the fake Muhammad, convincing him that he was the final prophet. Which bears fruit because one of his students was a dude named Arthur Wasserman who converted to Islam, and he's the one who told them that they should take all of the pictures of the black Muslims who started the culture and all of that dance. The more they anchored it into the Europeanized Persian religion. Yeah, exactly. See what I'm saying? So this is the Quran that these dudes is under. The fake one, the new Quran, what they call the glorious Quran. The one we supposed to be reading was the one translated by Yusuf Ali, if anything. But the Moors, Moor Science Temple America, Moors, we have our own Moor Science Temple. Excuse me, Moor Circle 7 Quran. So, like any people supposed to have, they holy book. It's just that ours acknowledges the history and the culture of all of that. So as we brought it up to who we are as Moors in the present, you see, we definitely see who we not. Yeah. But remember, Ethiopia is the Roman translation of Abyssinia. You see what I mean? So the question bears, why would Selassie name the country Ethiopia instead of the ancient name? You see what I mean? But why would he name it that and not the corporate name? You see? That's the problem. Because they all keep it a Masonic secret. You understand? Everybody that they told us was black and all of that was white because of the influx. This is also why they hated the Russians, because the Russians were the original Asiatic Americans. You see, and then by blood connected to the so-called West Indians. You see, who are all basically post-Atlanteans, Lemurians, and all that. While those more up in Europe that descended from the Grimaldi line, get the book Sex and Race, volumes 1 to 3, and you'll read about the Grimaldi aspect that is the royal line that they all are supposed to descend from. The oldest being the Oldenburg, being the so-called Romanov, who they killed off. I'll show you the real Romanov family in a second. So remember, the influx of what we perceive as the modern uh, pale European and pale Asian running the country stuff all happened between 1860 and 1910. See? Coinciding with the New Madrid earthquake, the War of 1812, the War of Russia and Napoleon against Tartary, against Tartaria, the eventual Civil War, Reconstruction, right? The creation of the KKK, the last of the so-called Indian Wars, what you call it, what was left of the original oil barons, right? Slowly starting to see things switch up, all from this. You know what I'm saying? Create the Reconstruction, put everybody under the history that black people is niggas, niggas are slaves, create the minstrel industry with niggas like P.T. Barnum, another black man, and Bailey, another black man. When the last time you met a white man named Bailey? Think about it. Other than F. Lee Bailey. So most of these people are not even real people, is what I'm saying. Because everything we see about these people comes to us from TV shows and studios, and all of those are sanctioned by the government, have government sanctions and government censors that come from places like Iron Mountain and other locations to say what can or who can be what. So all the real history of what people really look like and all that, a lot of that is in the Freemasonic Museum. So this guy in history, they said, was a guy named Yamarmat Musalet, who was kidnapped, right? They said he was kidnapped, and then he was brought to thing, and then because he could read and all of that, they wound up getting him up Yamarmat Maro, something like that. And then eventually he got to go back home and all that. No, that's Andrew Jackson. This is the one that was against all of the fake Indians and rounding them up and getting rid of them. You don't hear black people beefing about that. Think about it. All them Indians he rounded up was all the other people. The ones I told you that showed you that was brought over here as commodities, as slaves, and was squatting, right? And what did he say? He said that land that they using is they not using it. They not doing nothing with it, but turn it into garbage and all of that, right? Didn't he say that? Right? But you got to be a Freemason to go see that. Go see this. You know what I mean? Like this is what they doing. But they tell us these people is anybody. And we go along with it. They give us a nice history with it and all of that. But remember, all of that black history and stuff could be traced back to 3 white people. Melville Hershkowitz and the dude that wrote Myth of a Negro Past. And then jump ahead to people like Alex Haley. And then in our time, niggas like Henry Louis Gates. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta remember, man, these dudes was at a different time and they had to work and be around certain people. And we don't really know what the situation was. We can only go by the positive aspects they did. But this is Walter Pleckler. This is the dude who set up the racial hygiene thing to make Moors into Negroes and make that the household word to describe naturally born Moors, i.e. American Indians. So when you look at what Garvey was trying to do in terms of extricate natural so-called blacks to Africa to set up something else, what was really going on? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with him because, as you see, they turned on him. And who turned on him? He told you. These dudes. He just took advantage of what they was able to break down. Whether he should have known better or whatever with this person, we'll never know. But we can't ignore the fact that these people all traveled in the same circles. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep it real. You know what I mean? Right. You either trying to survive or you trying to live. Most people just trying to survive. So they'll do anything to survive, you understand? But to live means you gotta dig in and actually work together to create life. You understand? It's a different mentality. So when we think that these people are trying to go into space and go into all of these other realms and all this crap, you're not really trying to do that. They striving to get into the dimensional aspect of where we really are. That's what they're doing. And we told ourselves that they was doing this. We the ones that do all this stuff. We didn't just make this out of nothing. This is what the crescent and the star really represent. People are not ready for that. You know what I'm saying? So I don't gotta debate the flat earth, the this, the that. I don't gotta do none of that. It's already there. Islam exists. Islam does not, Islam means peace. Islam does not mean Muslim. Yeah, but this is the reality that you live in every day. We see this every day. We just don't see it from the perspective of it being seen. But this is how the reality really looks. So what these idiots are trying to do is trying to create a stairway to the exact dimensional space of where the firmament is. Which I told you guys on the other tape about the firmament, but I'll say it again. It's approximately how it works. You got the top view, and then you got the bird's eye view. Right? You know what I'm saying? So you look at it from this perspective, they shooting rockets up into this place, but whatever they shoot up has to come back down because as you see, there is an obvious barrier that exists there. Because I'm making it up because that's what I see at certain points in the year or in the day. So when they're shooting these things up here, it's actually being bounced back on them. They can't get out. So what they're trying to do is get beyond this. That's why you see what I'm saying, to get in, because at a certain point in the year, these little places here are open. Remember the movie they came out with called The Circle? Right? Remember another movie they had called Arrival, where they had the entities talking and they kept showing them these circles like that? They showing you where they exist and where they come from, beyond that aspect of the rift. You see? The ice wall. So within certain times in the year, you can get through and get past. But when you get through, other things can come through. Understand? Yes, the movie Arrival. Look at the shapes that the aliens were showing when they was communicating with them. They all look like this. They all circles within circles, which essentially is a circumpunct, but is actually the vertical version or horizontal version of this. And then there's an ice wall around this. And then there's an ice wall around that. The infinite aspect, or the ad infinitum, ad astra aspect of this is what allows us to dream and go beyond the mundane circumstances that we find ourselves in. That's the only reason why we can exist because we go to the places that they can't. And so they create ways to get us to navigate beyond it. So that way they can view it through us, through things like remote viewing, you see, dream catching, all of this type of technology that is all real, that they've just revealed is all real. So everything that we've been seeing is real. So there is no conspiracy theory. The only conspiracy is why people are trying to promote the idea that the government or any government on earth is trying to help any aspect of mankind. When they've all agreed to the Agenda 21 situation, they've all agreed to the trilateral associations stance on things, depopulation and all that. So every government in the world is guilty, you see. So all this stuff has been real. You can keep going. But we can only perceive the reality that we allow ourselves to perceive. All of these high places that they keep showing us are places that have actually or do exist, if not any place within the mind's eye. So when we are entertained or give physical energy to what we are entertained by, it gives energy to that aspect of it being real, wherever that is. Which then they try to use as a means to communicate and anchor to. This is why the Hadrian Collider is in the exact same shape. Exactly. Because they're all following this idea that this place exists the way that they tell us it does, and it doesn't. And so because we are the natural rulers of it, we have to constantly be put down, got to constantly be put in a situation to be controlled. And so every aspect of the world is under that network of control. So this has nothing to do with conspiracy, whatever. This is just what it is. And that control, the faces of all of this is Caucasian people. But if the devil is a liar, then that means that if the faces of this is Caucasian people, and they keep telling me that the people behind them is alien, then it must be something that's alien to white people. What's more alien to white people than black people? Like, I think as a species, as people, we need to start thinking beyond the relative, okay, and understand that we were put here also by people that look like us and that they're continuously working. Remember, in Django, Stephen was signing his name as Carl Candy, which means that he was probably Carl Candy, and Carl Candy was actually Stephen, the slave. But they were playing the role, which was the opposite. Professor Hamlin informs us that legislators in Virginia sought to cover up the record of white bondage and its equivalence to Negro servitude. The compiler of Virginia laws codifying black slavery for the first time. So this means for the first time ever, black people were listed as slaves in Virginia. And up until then, only white people were. This is from the Forgotten Cause of Civil War. For the first time, then takes the liberty to altering the text to bring earlier legislation into line with his own new notion. For example, the alterations to insert the word slave as a reference to blacks in Virginia when it had not been used to describe them that way before. That means free or not. See? This is what I mean. Like, we gotta understand the history of this thing is deeper than what these niggas is telling us, and that the people that's been holding it down, people that's been down with it. On your left is Chaim Solomon, one of the first benefactors of the original Confederacy. His family can trace themselves back to Granada, being kicked out. And in the middle is a depiction of King Roderick, who was kicked out by Jabral al-Tariq, peace be upon him. And then on the left is Haile Selassie, aka Victor the First, Victor the Second, King of Italy, Emperor of Italy, Emperor of Ethiopia. You know what I'm saying? I am Solomon and his family is the ones that built all those magnificent, helped build, restore, and refurbish those ancient synagogues that's down there in the Moorish style in Charleston and places. Okay, and again, this again is an Indian who's Italian by way of Ethiopia. They were Indians who went the opposite way into what was then Abyssinia, conquered the native people that was there at Liabella, and then moved the capital to Axum. And then from Axum, King Asania establishes Christendom as the religion, which is Coptic Christianity, a version of the Abyssinian stuff, but now is more veiled with the mysteries of the ancient Jewish mysticism, Hebrew mysticism, and the Indian stuff that they had been kicked out of India for. And that is the lineage that this dude comes from. And they, in Rome, helped establish Rome under the ancient house that helped put Septimius Severus in power. And they, through him, established the House of Savoy. And from the House of Savoy, we get the kings of what became Italy and Sicily after the Moors had been kicked out. So by the time of Benito Mussolini, another black man, they was able to flip this on the people by making him the hero of Ethiopia when really he's Italian. Okay? The guy on the left is Haile Solomon. His family founded or helped fund the Confederacy. What we know as the Confederacy, his family put up money from that. And they descended from Moors who had got kicked out of Granada, which we know is in the western portion of the United States of America. Understand? This is the world they're trying to get rid of. So this again being Iberia, i.e. Andalusia, which was a part of the Iberian Peninsula, had to get shut down between the years that they brought all these Europeans over here and then made them think that they were the ones that built it up and then knocked down all the stuff that was specifically detailed to us. See what I'm saying? Hit them busting down a minaret. This was Florida. Ain't no white people built this. No white people built any of this. So, anybody have any questions? I bought one the other day. This is where I live at. There's a canal. And we keep plants with a light garden. So a good jurisprudence book is Bouvier. If you get Bouvier's first to third edition, it's pretty good. If you check out Islam. If you check out, of course, Black's Law to the fourth edition, if not the seventh. Also, a good way to get familiar with jurisprudence and how maxims work is at the back of the Black's Law Dictionary. There's a whole aspect of Latin maxims. If you can get familiar with saying those out loud and understanding how they're used, you can invoke that at any time because that falls under what's called theocratic Salic law. And under theocratic Salic law, that's how you move forward. You know what I mean? You can bind them up with that as well. Yeah, like I said, they got the 5150 ritual with DMX and Black Rob right after they got rid of these other ones. So it's definitely going to be a problem for them to get any of this off the ground the way they want. But that doesn't mean they're going to stop trying. So in the meantime, it's best, in my opinion, to get understanding as to how this works. So when you're out here, you're not getting caught up in all these useless arguments with these people that are not that. Like I wouldn't go to a person who calls themselves Chicano and then tell them what it means to be Chicano. All I can do is talk to them from the perspective as what Chicano means to me. And to me, if we're going to get into the historical aspect, it means something very different than what it means to you. You understand what I'm saying? It means something totally different. So if you look at the architecture like I was showing you, it resembles a lot of the Russian architecture that we see here. Remember, I told you in 1812, not only was the earthquake popping, but they established the war between Tartary and France and Russia teamed up to basically depose Tartary and seize all of its property. So a lot of this is starting to make sense as to how the United States and where this whole hatred of Russia is really coming from. These modern Russians are just the modern equivalent of what the white Europeans are to us today. It's just that they can't be as racist because they grew up with all of this stuff, because the Renaissance never went to Russia. Peter the Great wasn't happening. So as you see, this is an image of the ambassador of Kiev, standing by King Vladimir from Byzantine, meeting the Byzantine bishop before the Byzantine emperor, Basil II, in 967. So as you see, everybody's black except this one white attendant right here. He might just be light skinned. So this is Russia. Understand? As well. And in Russia was people by Asiatics. Right? Who they also call Tartars. Just like they call us Barbars. See? The same thing. You just got to get over all of this division that everybody's putting in and focus on establishing us individually and then collectively doing something. Because I'm showing you the family tree and we're all a part of it. And they are too. They just exclude themselves by the tribalism. But if we are really a race of high priests, that's a different way to look at stuff. That explains a lot. You know what I'm saying? So according to the Nuremberg Code, as we close, again, they are forbidden to do things that disrupt our natural physiology. And that if they do, they can be tried for war crimes. Under Article 6, Section 3, in no case should a collective agreement or the consent of a community leader or any other authority substitute for an individual's informed consent, which means you have to tell me everything about it. And not only that, if I decline it, you can't force me to take it. Understand? leaders should be aware that mandating masks on citizens of a nation and preventing their access to food, healthcare, transport, or education if they don't comply is a war crime. Masks or any other medical intervention must remain voluntary. All right. So this is where the vaccine and the and the consent and all of that come to bear, because now there's different venues that can be put in, and based upon the equity value at $484.34 a gram of melanin, and attaining that to all of this per capita so-called black people being killed and disappeared, it can be shown that if we start to apply that to the rise in the equity of these companies that have these specific demographic and targeted markets, that we can show that there's a connection. You know what I'm saying? So again, they don't want to take it there. So having that in terms of the vaccination exemption and stuff like that should definitely be thrown in there in terms of it being a war crime and citing the actual Nuremberg joint, just in case they ever try to take it there, which they trying, but not enough people are understanding what they're really striving to do. That they basically are taking the place of the Nazis, and that the whole regime, which is worldwide now, has proven itself to be complicit. Not because I say so, because the Australian government, Department of Health, has no record of a COVID-19 virus isolated from any human on the planet. You can write the Australian government and they'll give you a copy of the report. So that's that. So again, our genetics are being harvested. We need to understand that, and we need to preserve them as much as possible. You know what I'm saying? And we need to collectively work together through group economics and cultural modern customary law, in my opinion, to be able to move things forward, regardless of whether you're Hebrew, whatever. You know what I'm saying? As long as you got a nationality and you're more, or you consider yourself and understand that you're a Moorish American based on the geographic location that you're born, that you're in, and then you become a Moorish American by getting a temple card at least and having dues to a credible temple or a temple period, really, because it's really about the spiritual aspect of what you're doing. Religion is just the spiritual representation of this reverence of the higher self, which is really you, which is really Allah. So who cares? In the end, do what you got to do, so that way you're not dependent on that aspect of it to interpret it for you. That's all I'm saying. So then that way you can deal with it under the fellowship of what it is. You dig? And then we do the real work to build that up the same way these other ethnicities built up their so-called religious bases that gave them the financial and the corporate right to do all the crap they do now. What's wrong with that? You know what I'm saying? Like what's the problem? See? So Islam, thank you guys for coming through. And anybody wants to hit me up at houseofhotmail.com. Also, you can go to www.cordobaorganics.com and www.aseertheducateers.com, www.gumroad, and then type gumroad.com. That's gumroad.com, and then type in Aseer the Ducateers in the chat. And I think there's some new classes and stuff up there. And again, you can just hit me up at houseofhotmail.com. Right? Islam, man. Thank you guys, man. I appreciate it. Pax et amor in Marina. Eos was Roman mortis, Preconium Laudamus. Pax et amor.